Today's spoiler video is brought to you by Card Kingdom. Use the link below to pre-order your cards today. Hello everyone, it's Seth, probably better known as Saffron Olive, and it's time for another daily dose of Ravnica Allegiance spoilers, and we have a ton to talk about today. The weekend is over. We had some cards slip out over the weekend late on Friday, which means we have all those to catch up on, along with a bunch of new cards that just came out today, which means we should probably jump into it, because we just have a ton to talk about, and I'm super excited for it. Before we do, a quick reminder, if you haven't already, it would be so sweet of you if you could take a second, click that subscribe button down at the bottom of your screen. It's a great way to support the channel and the site for free. So let's jump into some Ravnica Allegiance spoilers, starting with our first mythic of the day and our last planeswalker, I believe, from the set, Domri Chaos Bringer, and this card's pretty sweet. 4 mana, 5 loyalty, in the Gruul colors, of course, because it's Domri. +1, you add a red or a green, and if the mana is spent on a creature spell, it gains Riot, which is actually a pretty scary ability. -3, you look at the top 4 cards of your library, you can grab 2 creatures from among them, put them in your hand, the rest goes on the bottom, and then -8, so you need 1, 2, 3 pluses to get there. You get an emblem where at the beginning of each end step, you get a 4/4 red and green beast token with trample, which that is a pretty game-winning ultimate because of the each end step part. That means you pass your turn after ultimate and you get a beast. Then on the end of your opponent's turn, you get a beast. That's 8 power and toughness each turn cycle with trample across 2 bodies. That's going to be hard for most decks to beat. So Domri, in some ways, it's kind of what I was expecting. Domri has always been a creature-based planeswalker, and Domri Chaos Bringer is no different. All of its abilities involve creatures, care about creatures, at least to some extent. So what are you doing with Domri? And I think the most exciting part of Domri is the +1 ability. It kind of reminds me a little bit of Sarkhan Unbroken. You don't get to draw a card, but the upside instead is giving a creature you cast with the mana Riot. So this does 2 things. First off, it kind of gives you a way to protect Domri. 5 loyalty, and going up to 6 right away is another way. But if you can +1 and play a cheap creature, you'll have a blocker to protect Domri. Plus, Domri is really kind of like this top end of a mid-range or aggro creature deck planeswalker, so you likely already have some 1-drops, 2-drops, 3-drops on the battlefield on defense to keep Domri alive, and then you can use the Riot ability to just like have hasty Carnage Tyrants and stuff, which is incredibly scary. That's probably what I'm most scared of with this card, is Domri on turn 4, untap turn 5, extra mana, hasty Carnage Tyrant. Because of the -3, I think that this will most likely fit in very heavy creature decks. You really want to make sure you're hitting 2 creatures with that -3, which means you're going to want 20, 25 creatures in your deck to play Domri. I mean, you don't have to. Hitting 1 creature, it's okay, but the real power of Domri is that -3 being not just a draw 2, but draw true really big creatures. So I imagine that a Gruul mid-range / aggro deck is an easy home. Domri could be a great top end of aggro just to generate card advantage, or it could be a nice mid-game play in a mid-range deck where, like we were talking about, you ramp into Carnage Tyrants or Ravager Warbs. And then the ultimate, it's kind of reminiscent of like Liliana the Last Hope, a Johnny Adversary of Tyrants, although as I mentioned before, the big deal is it's the beginning of each end step, which means you're getting double the beasts essentially in a 2-player game. And in Commander, if you ultimate, that's a lot of beasts coming into play. So the ultimate is game winning, not immediately in 1 turn, but as we've seen with like Liliana's in a Johnny Adversary of Tyrants, it's very likely that you are going to win the game if you get to ultimate over the course of a few turns, unless you're like almost dead on board and a burn spell gets you or something. So I think that Domri is a very potentially powerful planeswalker, and when we look back on Ravnica Allegiance, it might be that Domri is the best planeswalker from the set. Maybe Dovinbond can give it a run for its money, but Domri is very strong. I think that it will definitely find a home in Standard. Hasty Carnage Tyrants, certainly scary, drawing 2 with the -3, a powerful ability, and a game-winning ultimate. So pretty much all you could ask for in a 4-mana planeswalker that goes up to 6 loyalty immediately, which means it's going to be hard for people to kill. So I think Domri going to be very impressive in Standard. Very excited for it. I don't know how much we'll play it, but I certainly expect to die to it a lot because it is a very powerful card in Gruul or like Gruul X aggro and mid-range decks. Next on our list, and oh my god, I can't believe I'm saying this, we have a 4-mana Wrath. Wizards said they removed them from Standard. They stuck to their word for a long time, but the time has come for 4-mana Wraths to finally return. Caius Wrath destroys all creatures for white, white, black, black. So yes, it is 4 mana. It does have a very restricted mana cost, but you blow up all the creatures and you gain life equal to the number of creatures you controlled that were destroyed this way. So kind of a pseudo fumigate almost. You don't get life for your opponent's creatures, but you still can gain a bit of life if you're hurting your own stuff. So this card, I mean, it is the return of what Wraths have historically been. Over the course of Magic's history, 4 mana, that's a sweet spot. Wrath of God, Day of Judgment, Supreme Verdict, add Caius Wrath to the list, and while the mana cost is restrictive, I mean, Supreme Verdict is also fairly restrictive in mana cost, and it was the premier card of its deck in its format. It sees play back to Modern, so I am super excited for Caius Wrath. The Fumigate ability, while not as powerful as Fumigate itself, because it only triggers off your creatures, is still a nice bonus against aggro, and I think the main reason to be excited for Caius Wrath is there's a lot of good aggro decks in the format. We have Llanowar Elves decks, speeding up mono green Gruul colors. We have mono red. We have stuff like Gruul Spellbreaker entering the format, making Rakdos scary, making Gruul scary, making Jund aggro scary. There's a lot of good aggressive decks, so having control decks or slow or mid-range decks have access to a Wrath that is only 4 mana and not so easy to play around to settle the wreckage. This is just a massive deal. If Orzhov mid-range, or like Mardu mid-range, or Abzan mid-range, or Esper control is going to be a deck, one of the big reasons for it is we finally have a 4-mana Wrath back in Standard. So I am unreasonably happy and excited for this. This is just such a huge deal because it's been so long, and I'm super excited for Caius Wrath, even if the mana cost is going to restrict the decks that can play it. Next on our list, we have another mythic, and I don't really know what to make of this one. Mesmerizing Benthede. So 5 mana, you get a 4/5 octopus. When it comes into play, you get 2/0/2 illusion creature tokens with whenever the creature blocks something, it doesn't untap during your controller's next unstep step. And then Mesmerizing Benthede has hexproof as long as you control an illusion. So I'm really not sure what to make of this. On one hand, 5 mana to get a 4/5 with hexproof and 2/0/2s with upside, that's not a bad rate just based on stats and abilities. So I could see this being like a mid-range or control option to slow down aggro, just putting up a wall of 3 blockers against decks with like Fanatical Firebrands and other aggressive threats. That might be enough, but I really don't know where this card fits. It doesn't really fit in mono blue tempo. There might be better options as like mid-range and control finishers. It's certainly a spicy card. Maybe this is an illusion card. Obviously, if you can make more illusions, you power up the hexproof ability. The problem is we don't have that many illusion options in Standard. I mean, maybe Jace Cunning Castaway, the -2. It's time for Jace to finally shine. Narcomoeba, Murmuring Mystic does make bird, so I guess you could kind of try to go that route and go the illusion route. So I don't know. I think this is a cool, flavorful card, but I don't really know what to do with it other than try to live the dream of Quest for Ula's Temple in Modern or in Commander. Free octopuses off the top of your deck. I mean, why not? Why not? So Mesmerizing Benthede is a card that I think is fun. It is flavorful. It offers a decent rate for its mana cost. The hexproof makes it good on defense, but I just don't know what you do with it. So if you got some ideas on how to actually use and abuse Mesmerizing Benthede, make sure to let me know in the comments, because it's a super spicy card if we can find a way to take advantage of it. Next up, we have Nykeya of the Old Ways, and this is a pretty unique card. So 5 mana, 5/5 legendary Centaur Druid. So stats are fine. Big drawback, you can't cast non-creature spells, but big upside as well, you basically double any mana you produce from lands. Whenever you tap a land for mana, you get a mana of the type that was produced. So you tap a forest for green, you get another green. You tap a mountain for red, you get another red. That's a lot of mana doubling potential. So as far as comparisons, we've seen a lot of these mana doubling cards before, and Nykeya is similar. Dictate of Karametra, Mana Flare, old school version, Zur-Ta, Ancient kind of does the same thing. The difference is, all of these cards, the drawback is they impact both players. So your opponent also gets to double up their mana. Nykeya only impacts your mana, which is a massive upside, although it comes with that huge drawback that you can't cast non-creature spells. Because when I first saw this, I was like, oh my god, you just like play this on turn 5, untap on turn 6, Omniscience, do all kinds of things, it's amazing. So it's very restrictive in the decks that can play it. Thankfully, we got some really powerful, expensive things. Like, if you can play Nykeya on turn 5, or even maybe earlier with the help of Llanowar Elves or other ramp spells, you just untap the next turn, Zakama, untap all your lands, which doubles up your mana again, which means you get like a million Zakama activations, or just play another huge thing, an Impervious Ray, we're a Carnage Tyrant. So if you can find the right build for Nykeya, it can be really powerful, and it's worth mentioning we already have Nullhide Ferox, which is kind of like a softer version of the same drawback, so maybe it's possible to play just mono creature Nykeya ramp in Standard, and just use it to play really massive things. I mean, the upside is, if you go deep enough, we do have like Ravenous Chupacabras and Hostage Takers as removal. We have things like Kite Sail Freebooters as discard, so you can kind of get a lot of spell-based effects out of your creatures and completely work your way around Nykeya of the old ways. So we'll have to see. It's a really unique card. It has potential to be absurdly powerful, but there's a huge deck building restriction with not being able to play non-creatures. So we'll have to see how it actually shakes out. If people can find a way to build their deck to embrace the obvious power of the Centaur Druid and still have a functional deck that doesn't just get run over by opponent's creatures because you can't play removal spells and wraths and such. So really unique, spicy card. We'll have to see just how good it is, though. Next up, we have Theater of Horrors, which is a pretty interesting enchantment. So 3 mana in the Rakdos colors. At the beginning of your upkeep, you exile the top card of your library. During your turn, if your opponent lost life, you can play the card exiled with Theater of Horrors, which play here is important because it does mean you can make land drops off of it, unlike some other options. And then you could pay 4 mana to ping something, an opponent or a planeswalker. So this kind of reminds me of like Outpost Siege or Vance's Blasting Cannons, except you got the drawback where you need to be damaging your opponent, which kind of reminds me of Phyrexian Arena. The 3 mana cost, maybe this is a card that works in like Rakdos aggro. It's a great way to take advantage of speculate effects. Like if you have Spawn of Mayhem on the battlefield, you're just drawing an extra card each turn for free for 3 mana, which is a huge upside, and we got a lot of ways to build around this. Judith gives you the pinging ability, Fanatical Firebrand, so if you can build around damaging your opponent, and it might be as simple as just being aggro. Like if you're just curving out 1-drop, 2-drop, you can probably damage your opponent just by attacking them. And then in the late game, the upside of being able to pay 4 for a damage, it might not seem like much, but it does turn on your speculate stuff. So you can always have access to Light Up the Stage, Rick's Maudry Reveler, all these cards in the late game. It is mana intensive, and that doesn't even include the fact that sometimes you just want to throw a damage at your opponent's face. And while 4 mana for 1 damage is certainly not efficient, you're playing the card as a card advantage engine, and then that's just an upside. So maybe you get your opponent to 1 or 2 life, and this is the card that manages to close out the game. So I think this could be a great Phyrexian Arena type effect for aggro decks, especially speculate / Rakdos style decks that can really take advantage of it. But I think this card, keep an eye out for it because it has a chance to be very strong in the right build. Drawing an extra card a turn for 3 mana, that's a really good deal in the deck that can take advantage of it. Next up, we have Electro Dominance, and oh my god, this card. This is the card of the set, well, one of them at least, that I'm most excited about for Modern. So Electro Dominance, double red and X, instant speed, X damage to any target, and you can cast a card with converted mana cost X or less from your hand without paying its mana cost. Worth pointing out here, as far as I understand, timing restrictions still do apply. So if you cast this during your opponent's turn, I'm pretty sure that you can't just put a non-flash creature into play or cast a sorcery. You'd have to cast an instant, but you can't just do it during your main phase anyway. So in Standard, this is a really powerful effect because we see with cards like Banefire, they're powerful, they're good at killing a thing, but you kind of spend your entire turn on a removal spell without advancing your board. Electro Dominance kind of fixes this. You still almost get the same rate as Banefire, 1 extra red mana in terms of damage, but if you can cast this for 8 mana, 7 mana, even just 5 mana, you're getting a creature or a planeswalker or whatever out of the deal as well, which is really, really powerful. However, the main reason I'm excited for Electro Dominance is this card might shake up Modern. So we've seen As Foretold show up as a way to cheat cards like Living End, Restore Balance, Ancestral Visions, Wheel of Fate into play. With their no mana cost, Electro Dominance gives some redundancy here. So in Modern, you can cast Electro Dominance for 2 mana. So X is equal to 0, and you get to just play Restore Balance, or Living End, or Wheel of Fate for free as your 0 mana card, which, combine this with As Foretold, might mean we have enough redundancy now to play like, is it Living End, or is it Restore Balance, and Wheel of Fate to churn through the deck, or Ancestral to draw cards. So I'm really excited to see if someone can figure out a way to break Electro Dominance with the no mana cost cards in Modern, because we've, like I said, we've already seen As Foretold almost be good enough all by itself, and that's the only real good way of cheating those cards into play outside of Cascade, which you can't play with Electro Dominance. So maybe having Electro Dominance and As Foretold can make some of those broken 0-cost spells really, really strong in the Modern format. Next up, we have Variety Circle, and this is a card that at first glance I was like, it's okay, but the more I think about it, the more I think you could build a really fun deck around it. So 3 mana enchantment, whenever a creature an opponent controls becomes tapped, if it isn't being declared as an attacker, you get to draw a card, and then you can pay 4 plus a blue to tap a creature without flag, which means technically you could just pay 5 to draw a card, which isn't a horrible deal. So on one hand, this is kind of a hate card. It shuts down things like March of the Multitudes, Venerated Loxodon. Maybe hate card isn't quite the right word, because you can still cast March of the Multitudes, but if your opponent taps a bunch of creatures for Convoke, you get to draw a whole bunch of cards, probably find an answer. If your opponent's using Llanowar Elves, you get to draw a card whenever they tap it. So that's the fair way to play it. The thing I'm most excited about is trying to turn this into like a combo piece. We have cards like Merfolk Trickster, which just taps a creature. We also have Sleep, which is the most insane one, and Tempest Caller, which taps all of our opponent's creatures. So in theory, if your opponent has 3 or 4 creatures on the battlefield, or maybe even more, you cast a Sleep, you're not just fogging your opponent and tapping their stuff, you're also drawing like 4 cards, or maybe even more if they have more creatures. Same with Tempest Caller. And the power here is you can potentially chain these cards together. Imagine like Sleep, 4 of, Mission Briefing, 4 of, maybe some other ways to get spells back from the graveyard. There's a chance you could just play Variety Circle Fog, where you sleep, tap all your opponent's stuff, draw a bunch of cards, untap on your next turn, sleep again, or Mission Briefing for sleep, tap all your opponent's stuff, draw a bunch more cards. So I'm pretty excited about the potential of using it as a combo piece to tap down your opponent's creatures, which seems like a really fun deck to play. You can even try to do it in Modern. It's cute and on curve with like Cryptic Command, where you play this, then you Cryptic, tap all your opponent's stuff, draw a bunch of cards. And in Modern, you get like Snapcasters and Torrential Gearhulks to keep flashing back the Cryptic Command. So this is a card that I think is way more fun than I thought at first glance. At first I was like, all right, this is a bad card that just kind of hates on Convoke, but I think if you build around it, you could generate a ton of card advantage and do some really sweet things. Next up, we have a very controversial uncommon, and this one's actually been out a few days, but we haven't talked about it. Wilderness Reclamation, 4 mana enchantment, beginning of your end step, untap all lands you control. So this is kind of in some ways like a free enchantment if you have instants to cast. The thing I'm most scared about with this card is like the Nexus of Fate deck. If you play this on turn number 4, on turn number 5, similar to Teferi, but even more powerful in some ways as far as ramping, you're going to have enough mana that you go to your end step, tap all your lands, untap all your lands, cast Nexus of Fate, and go right into the Nexus of Fate loop, which is really insane. Also, an absurd card in some sort of Bant Addendum deck, where you can cast your Emergency Powers main phase, take advantage of the Addendum effect, and then untap all your lands to have all your cards available and instants available. Even just with like Chemister's Insight, being able to tap out main phase and then untap in Chemister's Insight on your opponent's turn or leave up counter spells, there's definitely some potential there, and in some ways it's reminiscent of Teferi. You get even better untapping abilities than Teferi, where you can tap out on turn 4 for this, and you're kind of okay with it, because you get to untap your lands and leave up removal and counters anyway, similar to how Teferi works and protects itself. You obviously don't get the card advantage, so for me, I think Wilderness Reclamation is a card that has potential to be extremely broken in specific decks, with Nexus of Fate, with Addendum, with a bunch of instants, some sort of Bant control. March of the Multitudes is hilarious. Tap all your lands, untap them, tap them again, huge March of the Multitudes. So I think specific decks can take advantage of it, but it's not a card that you just want to slot into every deck. You need to have those instants, those Addendum spells, those Nexus of Fates to really make it good. Otherwise, Rhythm of Savagery, another potentially powerful uncommon, makes it so your creatures can't be countered and creatures you control have rise. Riot, and I'm mostly excited for this in some sort of Gruul beatdown deck. Riot is an ability where if you could give it to any creature, haste, it makes things very scary for your opponent. Imagine just a beatdown deck with Pelt Collectors and Steel Leaf Champions and Nullhide Ferox, where you're just ball lightning in these huge threats turn after turn after turn. A lot of decks are going to have a hard time dealing with that. And in Modern, you can do some combo-y stuff as well because of how Riot puts a counter on creatures. So with persist things like Kitchen Finks or Glenelender Archmage, you just keep resetting them. You sack Glenelender, counter something, comes back into play, you put the counter on it with Riot, and you have Glenelender again to counter something else. So you have like infinite negates. Throw in something like Blasting Station or another sack outlet, and you can gain infinite life with Kitchen Finks and just do crazy things. So I actually think that Rhythm of Savagery is a card that has potential to be pretty powerful in standard beatdown decks and maybe even in modern combo decks. Otherwise, Drillbit, kind of our latest take on Thoughtseize. 3 mana, although you can speculate it for just 1 mana, and I think this card's really good. 3 mana Thoughtseize is not the worst in standard. It's not great, but the power here is you're playing an aggro deck, you're getting in a 1-drop hitting, and on turn 2 you can start Drillbitting as an actual Thoughtseize, or even in the mid-game, 1 mana is pretty powerful because you can cast Drillbit and then still develop your board by playing more threats. So while it might look like a janky Thoughtseize, as far as standard Thoughtseizes go, Drillbit going to be really powerful. Essence Capture, basically an Essence Scatter with an extra blue in its cost, but can put a counter on a creature when you resolve it. This is a card that I expect to show up in the mono blue tempo deck. It's kind of just a free roll there since your lands are all islands anyway, so you might as well just play it over Essence Scatter and maybe put another counter on a creature. Otherwise, we got a bunch of lower rarity stuff that, fine for limited. I don't think it's really going to show up in constructed. Homunculus, pretty funny reference in callback there. Solana Wayfinder is a card that I want to be excited about, but it's kind of pretty major drawback. I love Satyr Wayfinder. The problem here is Solana Wayfinder puts the card on top of your library, so it doesn't actually generate any card advantage. It's more like a weird bad tutor to set up the following turn, and I think the flavor text kind of nails it. We're close, and that's how I feel about Solana Wayfinder. It's close to being good enough, but I don't actually think it will show up in standard. I mean, a 2-1 for 2 is not bad, but it's a lot worse than Satyr Wayfinder. Sphinx of New Prov, great limited card, too much competition in standard, and then a couple of lower rarity speculate enablers that could be pretty sweet. So anyway, those have been our daily Ravnica Allegiance spoilers for today. So let me know what you think. What do you think of Domri Chaosbringer? How good will the Planeswalker be in standard? How excited are you for Caius Wrath, the return of 4 mana rest for standard? Do you have any ideas for Mesmerizing Benthede? How can we take advantage of that? Is it possible for Nykeya of the Old Ways to show up in standard even with the no non-creature downside? How about Theater of Horrors? Is it our new Phyrexian arena? Electro Dominance, can it show up in Modern? Variety Circle, what other sweet ways are there to tap down opponent's creatures? How busted is Wilderness Reclamation? All the other lower rarity stuff, Essence Capture, Drillbit, Rhythm of Savagery, let me know in the comments. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I will talk to you soon. Thanks for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, help us out by clicking that like button down below. And to keep up on all the latest and greatest, click that subscribe button. And don't forget to hit that bell icon to get alerts whenever we have new videos. And if you want to, check out some of our other sweet videos here and here.